The Luans, a little species of musike, were once held in high regard across the galaxy. Their intelligence was superior, their developments in science and technology essential to the success of the Galactic Alliance. Yes, the Luans were brittle, modest and physically frail, but their contributions placed them among the most esteemed races. Others focused on conquest. The Luans focused on awareness. They were the silent architects behind some of the finest developments in energy, communications, and medicine throughout the stars. And then, the pestilence began. The plague quietly infiltrated their realm, like a silent shadow. Lurix 5, Predator. It initially appeared controllable. The Luans, familiar with adversity and backed by some of the finest medical minds in the galaxy, fought back. But the virus was unlike anything they'd ever faced. It spread, with terrifying speed, from city to city, and entire colonies collapsed in days. Each attempt to stop it only made it worse. The virus adapted. It intensified. Panic grew. The streets of Lurix 5, once filled with scientists and scholars, were drowned in terror. The Luans, once calm and collected, became desperate. They reached out to their interstellar allies, species they had aided for centuries, nations. They had gifted their knowledge. They begged for help. Silence. Quarantine stations filled with nothing but stillness. Days passed, then weeks. Still, no reply. And then the silence turned deafening. At last, a response came, but not the kind they had hoped for. The Galactic Council declared that Lurix 5 was to be placed under full quarantine. No ships would be sent. No supplies dispatched. The Luans were to be abandoned, isolated. The Council's rationale was cold and calculated. Once valued, the Luans were now expendable. Their brilliance, their contributions, were outweighed by the risk. The Galactics' Alliance, obsessed with survival, saw the Luans as a liability. No one would risk being infected. No one, except the humans. No ships came, no supplies, not even a message from their closest allies. Medical fleets that once worked beside the Luans, now gone. Disconnection. Isolation. Lurix 5 became a graveyard. Cities, once luminous, lay ruined, entire. Families gone. Those few who survived hid in underground shelters hoping for a miracle, knowing none would come. Above, the skies remained silent. No help, no ships, no hope, until a signal reached the unlikeliest of audiences, a small crew of human adventurers. Their fleet was charting unexplored systems, far from any major powers. Captain Arya Holt, their leader, received the distress call late at night while orbiting a distant moon. The message was buried under static, faint, nearly lost, but unmistakably Luan. The Council had ignored it. Arya didn't. She saw not just a call for help, but a chance to do what was right, even if it meant disobeying galactic orders. "We're going to Lurix 5, she said. No one argued. The small fleet changed course, headed straight for the quarantined world, prepared to face apathy with defiance. Captain Arya Holt stood on the bridge, watching the data stream in. Lurix 5's signal was barely audible, but its meaning was clear. They were alone. The Alliance had abandoned them, the same alliance they had once helped build. Holt's crew, explorers, not soldiers, didn't ask questions. They simply followed. It wasn't about politics. It was about doing what was right. As the ship neared Lurix 5, the devastation became evident. Dead cities, ruined streets, life signs scattered, dim and weak. The plague had ravaged the world. But still, they landed. They were met by a handful of surviving Luans, delicate, afraid, trembling. Captain Holt stepped forward. She raised her hand in a universal sign of peace. "We're here to help," she said gently. The Luans, broken by betrayal, hesitated. but one elder lifted a trembling hand. It was enough. The humans got to work. Medical supplies, food, quarantine tents. They knew the risks, but they stayed. They suited up and treated the sick, even as the Galactic Council sent threats. Withdraw. Immediately, the message read, face sanctions charges. Captain Holt didn't respond. She turned off the transmission, because none of that mattered. The Luons were getting better, little by little. Their trust was returning. Hope was returning. Humans offered not just medicine, but stories, songs, moments of laughter. They brought life to a dying world. But the Council didn't stop. More threats, isolation, economic retaliation, even hints of military action. But Captain Holt and her crew refused to leave because the Luons weren't just another race. They were people, worth saving. And as weeks turned into months, recovery began. Hope bloomed. The Luons began rebuilding. And then another signal came from deep in the galaxy. Strange frequencies. Unknown energy signatures. Dismissed at first, until the Zarak arrived. An advanced alien race, hidden in the shadows for centuries. Waiting, watching, and now, ready to strike. They saw a weakened planet, an abandoned world, a vacuum of power. Lurix, 5, now a target, but the humans were already there. They saw the Zarak ships, and they prepared. The fight wasn't just for the Luons. It was for something bigger, for decency, for defiance, for the belief that no one, no matter how small, should be left to die. Captain Aria Holt didn't flinch. She gave the order, hold the line. The obligation to protect the Luons dropped directly on the people, the Luons themselves. Yet they weren't as vulnerable as they appeared. For generations, their brilliance had been in the fields of technology and science. Even though they lacked the military might or physical prowess of other species, they had gathered enormous volumes of data on forgotten ancient alien technologies, untapped energy, and the hidden history of the galaxy. This information had mostly been disregarded by the Coalition, seen as unimportant in peaceful times. But now, with the Zarak progressing, that information turned into a lifeline. As the Luons and humans discussed the looming danger, the Luon elders revealed something unexpected, something concealed in their archives. It was information about the Zarak, a species once believed to be a myth, only referenced in obscure historical documents the Luons had kept for centuries. They possessed designs of ancient Zarak technology, tactical data passed down through generations of scientific research. Until now, it had never been valued. Captain Holt understood instantly. This knowledge, the Luons themselves, could be the key to changing the tide. Fragile in body, perhaps, but in mind, they held a treasure trove of forgotten power. What had once been dismissed as academic trivia had become the foundation of humanity's entire defense plan. Working closely with the Luons, humans began combining their ingenuity with Luon intelligence. They built new defenses, weapon systems, technology that bridged the strengths of both species. The connection grew, not just to survive, but with a shared purpose. The Luons, once left behind to perish, became essential. But knowledge alone wasn't enough. The Luons needed to fight. Humans began training them, guerrilla tactics, basic combat. While Luons weren't built for battle, their agility and speed made them natural scouts and saboteurs. They learned to use stealth, to set traps, to outmaneuver enemies much larger than themselves. It wasn't easy. They had never fought before. Their culture wasn't built on desperation, but on thought. Under human guidance, they began to adapt. They embraced their cleverness over brute strength. Their intimate knowledge of Lurix 5's terrain gave them the upper hand. All while, the Galactic Council said nothing. Despite rising threats, they refused to acknowledge the Zarak invasion. To them, It was just another distant conflict, not close enough to matter. Once again, the Luons and humans were alone. Captain Holt and her crew knew no help was coming. The Galactic Alliance had abandoned them, just like it had abandoned the Luons. But it didn't matter. The first battle was near. Humanity had faced impossible odds before. They would do so again. The Zarek would learn that humans do not abandon their allies. The initial conflict between the Human-Luon Alliance and the Zarek was inevitable. The Zarek descended onto Lurix 5 expecting little resistance. They were wrong. The Luons, working with humans, had reactivated ancient planetary defenses. They set up improvised barriers, mines, sensor jammers, energy shields, all sabotaging the Zarek's advance. Luon strike teams, small, fast, almost invisible, infiltrated the Zarek landing parties, cutting supply lines, disabling equipment. What was meant to be a swift conquest became a long, brutal war of attrition. The Luons, once seen as fragile thinkers, proved their worth in blood and fire. Their long-ignored knowledge gave them and humanity a crucial advantage. Humans provided strength, command, unity. But the Luons? They provided adaptability. They went from non-combatants to irreplaceable warriors. Still no match in brute force, but masters of sabotage, deception, and stealth. And so, the sky above Lurix 5 burned orange as the Zarek fleet emerged from hyperspace. The last stand had begun. Captain Arya Holt stood at her command center, watching the dark silhouettes of enemy ships flood the horizon. She knew her forces were outnumbered, but surrender? That was never an option. The defenses